first one is a double crusted Creole sausage and tomato pie. Double crusted, all that means is that we're going to be putting a crust over top of it after we put in the pie filling for it. And this one, it depends on the type of sausage you use. For instance, tonight I used an Italian sausage because it's a little bit more mild flavor compared to some of the other sausages we have down there. So that's something you want to take in consideration in doing the seasonings for this. Since I did use the Italian flavored one, I'm using less of the Italian season in this recipe. But if you get one of the spicy sausages that they have down there, you can adjust the paprika and the cayenne, or even omit it altogether, depending on, if you actually like really hot food and stuff, go ahead and add that in there. But that's one thing you want to take in consideration when you're making this sausage. Now, the sausage I'm using also is a Johnsonville, and it has the casing over it. So we'll be removing the casing because it'll help it cook up like hamburger almost when you chop it up. But if you have just regular sausage like Jimmy Dean, and you wanted to use that, you can use that for this recipe. You can even substitute it with hamburger if you wanted to. And it's like I was telling them earlier, if you do use hamburger, I would recommend adding just a little bit of chili powder with that. And it makes what they call a Tex-Mex pie, and it's really good. Okay, and the second recipe is an apple and blackberry pie with a streusel. This one, it's almost like a cobbler and a pie shell. It's always been one of my favorites. And it's another one that you can adjust to your own preference, because with the streusel now I'm adding oats into it. Some people don't like the flavor or can't eat the oats. You can leave those out. It'd be just as good. You can also adjust where you have more blackberries or more apples, depending on what your preference is. But one thing you do want to take in consideration with this recipe, sometimes you get blackberries that are really sweet. Sometimes you get them where they're really tart. And it just depends on when they're picked, if you picked them fresh and everything, or if you get them in the store. Go ahead and sample one to see how sweet it is, and that'll tell you how much sugar that you really want to put into this recipe. Because obviously if it's really tart, you want to add a little extra sugar into that. Okay, and then the final recipe is a chocolate raspberry orange pie. Now, I actually left the recipe for the crust on there. I'm actually using a pre-made crust that got down here off the shelf. It definitely saves a lot of time, and there's also another advantage of using that too. In that recipe, it talks about when I melt some of the chocolate down, coating the base of that. What that does is, if you make your own crust, a lot of times those crusts will be a little bit more flakier than the store-bought. And it's because they haven't really had time to set as well. And so what I do to compensate, you sit there and take some of that chocolate and put over top of it, and that'll keep the filling from moistening that crust too much to where it just makes it soggy, and it's real hard to cut apart when you do that. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started with the Creole sausage. Just add a little bit of oil in there. And I'm going to use a red onion for this. You could use a yellow or white onion if you wanted to. I wouldn't recommend a sweet onion though. And you want to cut this approximately about 1/4 of an inch. Like so. Okay. Go ahead and just throw that in there. And go ahead and let that cook just a little bit. Let that oil, soak up some of the juices from the onion. Soften the onion up just a little bit. We're not looking at cooking the onion completely through because we're going to be baking this for close to an hour. So we're not really focused on so much all the vegetables cooking through. The meat, we do want to make sure and cook that through before. I mean, if it is a little bit pink, yes, it would cook out in the pie, but just for a safety precaution, always make sure the meat is cooked completely through with this, especially since it's a chopped up meat. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and grab this. Like I said, I just used the regular Italian sausage with encasing. And just slice that casing out, or open, I mean. Okay. And we're going to crumble that up here in a second. Okay. And that should be enough for that one. Alright, we'll change gloves here right quick. I'm going to cook this on about a medium high. Okay, and just kind of bust it up just a little bit. And you'll find it a lot easier if you do it at this stage, because if you let it cook, it'll be a lot harder to bust up, unless you take an actual metal spatula and literally stab it going all the way around. Okay. So while that's cooking, we're going to go ahead and cut up our bell peppers. And definitely make sure to remove the labels there. Oops. And really you only need about half of one of these. These are so large. Go ahead and devein that there. Okay. I'm going to chop this up about the same size as your onions. And once again, like I said, we're not looking at cooking these all the way through because they will be baked off and it will finish up the cooking there. Okay. Now a little bit of celery. I believe there was a misprint on that. I noticed it said 2 stalks is all that it said. So I was going to let you kind of guess at stalks of what, but it's actually celery stalks is what they're talking about there. And just slice that up. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and throw the celery in here. And once you get it where the sausage, starting to take more of the crumbled shape that you're looking for, that's when I like to go ahead and add the seasonings to it. Because if you get the seasoning on the meat itself, it'll hold a better and a stronger flavor than if you try to put it in with the sauce for this. Okay. Get you a little bit of cayenne. Like I said, I'm using less Italian seasoning on this because of the type of sausage I use. And I use the same amount of cayenne, but I'm going to use a little bit more of the paprika though. Because that sausage, like I said, it's a really mild sausage. You want it to have just a little twang to it. Of course, if you like hot food, you can add a little bit more to it if you want. Actually add a little extra of the cayenne, or use a hot sausage for that. Okay. And I am going to add the salt, but I am not going to add the black pepper. And the reason for this, you'll see here in a second when we get out the tomatoes that go into the pie. How many has ever had just a slice of tomato with black pepper on it? That's favorite snack around here, definitely. Well, that same flavor is going to be really brought out into this pie too, you'll see. Okay. Alright, and that's almost about brown there, so I'm going to go ahead and throw that in. Oops, forgot a chunk. Now, I didn't use the green bell peppers because it has more of an earthly flavor to it. And you can tell a difference in the flavor. Now, you can use green bell peppers, though, if you want to. This, of course, it makes it nice and colorful. But as you put it in the pie casing, you're really not going to see that until you cut into it. Okay. Oops. I'll need some mayonnaise and an egg. It calls for 2 eggs. Well, 1 egg is going to be used for making an egg wash for the layer of pastry that's going over top. The other we're going to be mixing in with the mayonnaise here in just a second. Okay. Go ahead and bust that yolk up a second. Stir that in there. All right. Go ahead and throw in our mayonnaise. Of course, recipe says a cup. And you know me, I'm not good about using measuring utensils. Okay. All right. Stir that up there. You want to heat that up just a little bit because that'll help it thicken up Okay. Turn that down just a little bit while it's doing that. Now the pie shells that I'm using tonight, for the base one, I'm just using your traditional pie shell that you get, off the shelf. Now if you use these, it'd be, perfectly all right just to take a fork, kind of prick the bottom and the sides and everything, keep it from bubbling up. But if you use the kind that rows out, or you're using a homemade, I would actually recommend not only pricking it with a fork, but taking parchment paper, laying it inside, and filling it up with dry beans and cooking it first. And then cook that for about 20 minutes that way, and then take it out and cook it another additional 10 minutes. That helps to keep it from bubbling up on you, because especially those, a homemade one or one that you stretch out and you hit the form yourself, has more of a tendency to raise on you. And that's, can be disastrous for some pies too, as you can easily find out. Okay. Now you're going to do is add this in here. And then I'm going to add a little bit of cheese. Okay. Now another cheese that goes really good with this is the pepper jack cheese, because that gives it a really good flavor. And of course it's going to make it a little hotter too. Now with the tomatoes, you're looking at cutting those between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. And we're just going to fan those around. So it really depends on how large the tomatoes are that you're using. Of course, if you're using a Roma tomato, you're going to be cutting quite a few. But one thing you do want to make sure is leave that center open, which you'll find out here in a second why. So let me grab my pastry shell. Okay. Of course, you can mark this with a little cookie cutter if you wanted to. If you have a hard time cutting an actual circle out. Now, you at least want that. Now, if you have what they call a pie chimney, you could stick that in, and all that is like a little porcelain figurine. A lot of times they look like little birds or something like that, and allowed steam to escape through there. That's the reason we want this, because if you don't have that there, it's going to explode on you. And that makes a really big mess. And then, of course, if you want to make it look fancy, just a real easy design, you can use little cookie cutters, or just simply cut, just a basic leaf shape out. And then all you have to do is go around all 4 edges. Oops, didn't press quite hard enough there. Because there's a lot of really simple, easy designs you can make out of the dough if you want to. And it just adds a little extra pizzazz to it. Or if you just want to leave it plain, that's fine as well. Okay. Kind of drape that over there. Now what you want to do is just pinch it onto the edge and fold it over. Now you got to keep in mind the crust underneath is already cooked. I've seen some people where they put this too short, they try to put it to the edge. Well, that'll cause this crust to burn on the edge. So that's why you want to make sure and fold that over. And then all you need to do is just go around it and trim it from underneath. Now, if you're like me, I'll actually throw these onto a baking sheet as I'm making the pie and just make quick little snacks out of them. It's like, when you go to some of these fish places, you want the crumbs, fried crumbs left over. I'm the same way with pastries. It's like, if you got extra dough, just throw it on there and cook it off for me. Okay. There you go. And like I said, you got the hole in there, allow the steam, to keep it from, exploding on you. And now we're going to take our egg wash. There's a couple different ways of making an egg wash. Some people like adding a little bit of milk to it. And really, I found no need for doing that in most pastries. Just a simple egg, mix it up, and then brush it on, and it'll be perfect just as is. Okay. Of course, this actually goes in the oven, but I'm not putting it in there right now. The reason is, I've already baked one off. Okay. So you get that nice golden crust onto it. And the one thing I did forget to show on that was go ahead and put the pepper on top of your tomatoes before you cover it up. I just remembered that when I saw the top of that. And so there is another way. You can actually add other vegetables. Some people like, cooked zucchini or squash. You can actually omit the tomatoes and put those in there. And for that matter, you can make it into a vegetable pie, omit the meat altogether, and just use garden vegetables throughout the thing that way. Using the same seasonings and everything, same process, just not using any meat.